Bienvenidos a una entrevista íntima con el autor J. D. Barker, el fabuloso creador de la trilogía del cuarto mono. Un momento muy especial, pues el autor nos abrió la puerta de su estudio para conocer más de cerca quién está detrás de esta historia. Me acompañaron mis cómplices Ayelén, Maru y Paola, quienes sirvieron de intérpretes y al mismo tiempo buscaron junto conmigo las maravillosas preguntas que el autor respondió. Hay datos muy curiosos que les sorprenderán de este escritor tan interesante. También nos habló un poquito de su vida familiar y de sus próximos proyectos. Yo los invito a ver esta entrevista en cada una de nuestras cuentas y al mismo tiempo hablarles de nuestra sala Dark en el Club Atreyu, porque ahí estamos leyendo la trilogía. Ya vamos por el tercer libro, el cual nos garantiza un cierre de trilogía espectacular. Como siempre, los invito a dejar sus comentarios y apreciaciones de este momento tan interesante. Gracias.
Okay, thank you so much for being here with us.
Absolutely.
Perfecto. Nuestra primera pregunta es, ¿qué te llevó a ser escritor?
So our very first question is, why did you start writing?
Oh, geez. Okay, I'm going to try fast so you can translate. And if I talk too long, let me know.
Don't worry.
I grew up without a television in the house. My parents didn't have a TV, so they had us reading at a very young age. I started reading actual books when I was 3. By the time I entered kindergarten, which is about 5 years old or so here, I had read the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew mysteries, that whole series. And then I started reading Charles Dickens and all the classics. And my very first adult book that I actually read was Dracula. I read that one at 8 years old. I really expected my parents to take it away from me. I didn't think they would let me, but they let me keep it. And I loved that book. And I love the fact that it actually scared me, that a book was capable of doing that. And, to me, like books can be far more frightening than TV and movie. And I think it's because our minds tend to make up what we can't see, so you read that paragraph and your brain starts to fill in these blanks, and your brain is a lot better at it than a film or TV show can be when it comes to that. I think that's, in my opinion, why movies and TV aren't quite as scary. But when that book scared me, that's when I decided that's what I want to do. I want to figure out how to do that and try and do it in my own way. And I started, writing when I was very young. I've got a sister who's a year younger than me. Hold on one sec.
Yes, don't worry.
Oh my God.
Got a robot vacuum that wants to work right now. So I would start when I was a little kid. I would write out little stories, and my sister would check them out from my library in my room, and she would read them, and I would charge her late fees, and that's kind of where it all started when I was a little kid.
But when did you decide to do this, like for like a work?
Well, my parents told me that you can't make a living as a writer. So
yeah.
I go to college, I got a degree in business, and I worked in the corporate world for 20 some years. I was the chief compliance officer for a brokerage firm, which is as horrible as it sounds, but it pays really good. So I would do that job during the daytime, and then I would come home and I would work on books at night. And this started back when I was in college, and I'm going to go way back. In 1990, I worked for RCA Records in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. And I was a glorified babysitter. Whenever they had a famous recording artist come into the area, I'd have to pick them up at the airport and get them to their hotel, get them to the radio station for their interview, get them to their concert, and then get them back on an airplane. And to really date myself, this is people like Tiffany and Debbie Gibson and New Kids on the Block. Then there were a series of bands. They had Bon Jovi and Motley Crue and Poison, Guns N' Roses at one point. If I had to watch Guns N' Roses for a week and manage to get them all back on an airplane without anybody getting arrested, that was a win. I had these famous people in my car for days at a time, and I realized, well, I could interview them and I could sell those interviews and pay for my school. So that's what I did. So I started writing those up, and I sold them to magazines like 17 Magazine and Teen Beat and Teen People, Entertainment Weekly, and anybody that was willing to buy. And when you work in that environment, when you work for newspapers and magazines, you quickly realize everybody has a book that they started in a desk drawer somewhere. It's this long, they've been working on it for 10 years. It's almost done, but it needs just a little bit of work. So they started asking me to read those, and I started going through them and then, helping them figure out what was wrong with the story and what needed to be fixed. And I helped them get them done. And that's basically what I was doing at night when I came home from the corporate job. It's called being a book doctor or a ghostwriter. So I did that for 20 some years. During that time frame, 6 different books hit the New York Times bestseller list, which here in the States is a big deal. But they all had other people's names on the cover. None of them were technically mine, even though I did a lot of the work. So when that 6th one hit up, my wife pulled me aside and she said, well, let's come up with a plan so you can, try to write full time. And it was tricky because at that point, I had that good job for 20 some years, and we had the trappings of that. We had a big house, we had cars, we had a boat. It was expensive. So we couldn't just pick up and leave, because we have to pay for all this. So she came up with this crazy idea. She said, let's sell everything that we own, buy a duplex, which is like a small apartment, rent one and to tenants, and then live in the other side. And then just try to make ends meet off of our savings account. And we ended up doing that. We bought one in Pittsburgh because she had family there. Sold everything that we own. We moved in there and we looked at the bank statement and she said, okay, you've got about 18 months to become a professional writer. Go.
Wow. Wow. And you did it.
Quit my job and luckily everything worked out. It was scary for a little while there, but it's going okay now.
Nice. Okay. We are very, very excited to be with you. Honestly, we admire you a lot, and all the club is waiting for this interview because they all send the questions and everything because they are very excited. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Ok, la siguiente pregunta sería, estamos sorprendidos de que seas un autor de lo que nosotros llamamos escritor de brújula, en donde no tienes todo el plan preconcebido de toda una serie de libros, sino que lo vas haciendo por partes. El cuarto mono representa para nosotros, ha representado un gran rompecabezas en donde cada pieza tiene un lugar en la historia, tiene un toque importante en esa historia y nos gustaría conocer cómo hiciste el desarrollo de esta novela, bueno, de las 3 novelas en particular, y cómo es ese proceso creativo.
So we were all very surprised to hear that you are what we in Spanish call a compass writer and you guys call a pantser. And it's really amazing how you were able to create a series such as The Fourth Monkey without planning every step, because every book in the trilogy is a puzzle. And everything that happens has a meaning to the story. So we were very curious, how did you do it? What is your creative process like if you don't plan things?
Sure. So I've got kind of a superpower. I'm autistic. I've got a form of Asperger's. And that allows me to plot out in my head. I'm very good at problem solving. I can write computer code, which is very similar to writing a book, because when you write the first line of a program, you have to know how it's going to impact the rest of the program. So as I plot out these stories, I keep it in a way. I do outline, but it's just all up here. And I track all the moving pieces in my head. I more or less come up with a beginning, a middle, and an end. When I write a story, but the story itself I feel has to be character driven. So I have that scenario, and then I create my people, and I don't actually start writing until those characters, those people are real to me. So somebody like Sam Porter, I could take him and I could drop him at the entrance to Disney World, and I could tell you what ride he's going to run to first. I can tell you what he's going to have for lunch. None of that kind of thing will end up in a story, but that's what makes him real. And once my characters get to that level, then I know I can take them, I can put them in that scenario, and I can let them tell the story to me, because their personalities dictate what's going to happen. I've tried to outline, but what I find happening when I do that is the outline wants to go this way, and the characters are telling me, no, I would do this. And you tend to go off in the weeds, but as long as I have that beginning, the middle, and the end, if you think of it as a straight line or a road, I can do this, I can weave off, but my brain will always bring it back to here, and I'll keep going, and I know I have to end here. So I can do this, but I know eventually I'm going to get here, and I've learned to trust my subconscious to actually get me there. With a book like The Fourth Monkey, to give you an example of how that works, I knew my serial killer would die at the very beginning. And when they found his body, they found those items on him. They found the laundry receipt, they found the change, the diary, all those different things. I had no idea when I wrote that part what those things would mean. I basically learned what they meant as the story unfolded, just like the reader does. And I'm not new to that. That's something that I actually stole from Stephen King. In his book on writing, he says that he feels, if he doesn't know where the story is going, the reader's not going to be able to figure it out. And I totally agree with that. I've read many books that were written based on outlines, and you can see that structure in there. I think your subconscious picks it out, and it feels more like a it's just structured, like it belongs, like if this is going to happen, then this has to happen, this has to happen, and it feels almost like a formula, and I don't like that. I prefer to be organic. Like watching a movie in my mind when everything is working right, and I'm just writing down what I see. I let the story play out in my head, and I just write it all down. As far as it going into a second book, my agent wanted me to wrap it up with just one book, but I couldn't help myself. I wrote that final chapter, and then I had to put that box on.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
It just kind of led into the next one, and you're going to find a similar twist when you get to the end of book 2. But I promise.
Yeah, we already finished, and we are like very excited to start the third one.
Yeah, but it all does wrap up in the end. It all comes together.
Okay, perfect. Fascinante.
Fascinante.
Sí, ok.
Perfecto.
Bien.
Muy bien. Seguimos. En la serie de El Cuarto Mono encontramos información muy específica sobre medicina, investigación policial y tecnología. Sabemos que has ayudado a la policía a resolver algunos casos y que has entrevistado asesinos en la cárcel. ¿Siempre hablas con especialistas y tomas referencias y casos de la vida real para tus novelas?
Bien, so the question is, there is quite specific information about the police investigation process in your books, and the technology, medicine, and we know that you have been helping the police to solve some cases, and you have been interviewing some criminals also. So the question is, if you always take reference from real cases, or if you do some question to specialists to write your books.
I think it's a little bit of both, mainly because I have worked with the police. One of the reasons why they bring in writers, and I'm not unique to this, they talk to a lot of writers, but it's because we tend to approach a cold case very differently than they do, because we write these types of stories. So we tend to look at things that they don't necessarily look at. So when I write a story like this, or when I look at a cold case file, I tend to approach it more as a writer, and I ask questions that they may not have thought of. And then I look at what investigative techniques are available to answer those particular questions. So like in Fifth to Die, I think I mentioned quite a bit of computer technology. In order to do that, I just raised the question, what happens when you go into a Starbucks? What happens to that data? And I just started chasing that thread myself, and I spoke to IT experts and learned exactly how the hardware works. So a detective may have done that, may not have done that, but that's what I did. And if I were a real police detective, that's what I would do. So I learn a lot of these things as I go. Most detectives will talk to you about this type of thing. Particularly if you're working on a book. Here in the U.S., there's agencies that you can reach out to. The FBI, the CIA, they all have people that will help you get those stories right, because they would rather you get the facts right than you just make it up. The police departments are the same way. A lot of times it's a retired police officer, but they'll make sure you get the procedural stuff right. That being said, a lot of times you have to combine characters, you have to combine jobs. A good example of that is the show CSI. I don't know if you guys watch that. There's like 5 to 7 main characters, but in real life, those 5 to 7 people represent like 50 to 100 different people. Because everybody specializes. So you kind of have to do that in TV, and you have to do it in the books too, because nobody wants a book with 500 characters in it. You want 2 or 3 main ones. So there's a lot of work there to distill it all down, but I try to keep it as accurate as possible. If I don't, I always hear from the retired police officers telling me, no, you should have done this, you would have done that. It's better just to get it right.
Bien. hace un momento nos hablaste de tu personaje y que tus personajes te dirigen prácticamente en la historia, ¿no? Específicamente en la serie del Cuarto Mono son muchos los que existen y todos los hemos sentido, todos los lectores de tus libros lo hemos sentido bastante reales. ¿Cómo haces para desarrollar específicamente esas emociones, la psicología y el comportamiento que estos personajes tienen dentro de la historia?
So the characters in the Fourth Monkey books, they feel very real. We as readers felt that they feel like real people, their emotions, their behavior, their psychology. And how do you develop such characters, such complex characters?
It starts with really basic stuff. I actually just had this conversation with my wife this morning because she's working on a novel herself. So if you take somebody like Sam Porter, I knew that I wanted a police detective. I knew I wanted him to be, 50 some years old. His age changed a little bit as we were writing. And I figured out where he was born, which is important. And from there, I researched names because names change all the time, so I had to backtrack 55 years ago. What were popular boy names? And that kind of gives me that type of information. So it starts creating a framework. A lot of times if I have to create a character on the fly really fast, I'll rely on actors and actresses, people that I've seen in movies over and over again, because their facial expressions and the way they speak, their mannerisms, those kind of things are very familiar. So Sam to me was a combination of two people, and you guys are going to find this kind of funny. One was Michael Keaton and the other one was Morgan Freeman. So him to me in my brain is a combination of those two people. So once I had that, then that kind of became, it gave me the personality traits, it gave me a sense of humor. And then I just started building from there. But like I said, earlier, like until I feel that they're as real to me as my best friend or my wife or my next door neighbor, I don't start writing that book. And that's true of all the main characters in the story. Claire and Nash and all those guys, Anson, Emery. I knew who all of them were before I actually started writing. The secondary characters I don't spend quite as much time on, but I do like to, throw something in there to make them feel like they're real, even if it's somebody as simple as, somebody standing at the counter at a fast food restaurant. I still want them to feel like a real person.
Bien.
Muy
Merce.
bien. Sí. Ayelen, antes de ir a la siguiente pregunta, dile a JD que nosotras, cuando estuvimos desarrollando todas estas preguntas, le pusimos rostros a sus personajes, que él se sorprendería a los actores que escogimos.
¿Y quiénes son? Porque me los va a preguntar.
Bueno, Michael Keaton, George Clooney,
Okay.
Johnny Depp.
Okay. She said that when we were talking about your books, because we in the club, it's crazy all the theories that we are making up every time that we read your books. It's crazy, really. We can be like 2 hours talking about them and the characters and everything. And she said that we were like seeing your characters in the face of different actors. One was Michael Keaton, and the other one was
Johnny Depp.
George Clooney, Johnny Depp. So we can see your characters in every mind of us. It's like a different way. So, but it's very, very funny and amazing to share the books between us, and we are talking about you, your work, and your characters as they were alive. So that's amazing. So thank you so much for writing these books.
Oh, well, thank you for reading them.
Okay, merci.
Bien, hemos leído que la CBS compró los derechos del Cuarto Mono. ¿Podrías darnos algún avance de cómo va este proyecto?
Okay, so we read that the CBS Films just purchased the rights of the Fourth Monkey book, and we don't know if you have like some updates about that. If you will.
Yeah,
we'll
so
see that.
film and television is crazy, the way that it works. So all of my books have been optioned on some level to be made into a film or TV show. CBS bought, there was an auction, so it came down to a couple of different studios for Fourth Monkey, and CBS won that auction. And one of the reasons why I liked them at the time is because they said they would make a feature film for Fourth Monkey and then a TV show to follow up with the other couple of books. And they brought in a writer to work on that. It's the same writer who did Instinct. I don't know if you guys watched that on CBS. And Mark Webb was set to direct, who did the Amazing Spider-Man in that trilogy. Then COVID happened, and it slowed a lot of things down. They renewed their option a couple of different times. This last time they didn't, which means I got all the rights back. So my film agent has repackaged it. And now he's talking to another studio about doing just 3 feature films, so 3 movies in the theater. So we'll see where that goes. I tend to just kind of keep my head down and just keep working on the next book, because I hear these kind of stories, just like you do. It's great to have CBS on there. It's great to have Paramount making the Dracula movie. Like all these different things, but they're always changing. And honestly, it's distracting from my standpoint. Like it's great that it's happening. It's fantastic. I would love to see a movie or a TV show, but from my standpoint, I just want to write that next book. So I'll see it in the theater, right along with the rest of you, and hopefully it'll happen. It's really cool to hear, like that you guys had actors and actresses in mind for the certain characters, because I hear from the studios too, like who they've got in mind and who they want to bring in. And it's always neat to hear everybody else's, vision of who should be who.
Sin ningún tipo de spoiler, JD, ¿es la sexta trampa el final de la serie o podemos esperar más de estos personajes?
Without any spoiler, is the last book, the third book, the sixth Wicked Child, the last one in the series, or we can wait for something else?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. Writing those books was weird for me, because I didn't have any kids at the time when I wrote them, and a lot of people die in those books. A lot of young girls die in that book or those books. And I've got a little 3-year-old daughter now, and it changes your perspective on that kind of thing. They were very difficult books for me to write, just because they were so dark. There were many times where I wrote something and I just kind of pushed my computer away and had to go and take a break, because something really freaky and scary came out of my head, and I wasn't sure where exactly, like why was it even in there? So it makes you question a lot of things. And I wrote She Has a Broken Thing Where Her Heart Should Be, which isn't out in Spanish yet, but it should be soon. That kind of helped me clear all that information out of my head, and so to go back there, it's a really dark place. But I miss those characters. Like I said earlier, like they're real people to me. They're like my friends. And I can almost picture Sam standing off in the corner of the room, tapping his foot, going, "Hey, it's we got to tell them about this one." So we'll see. So I've got ideas for books that will continue, after Sixth Wicked Child. And I've also got ideas for 3 prequels, that would take place, when Anson Bishop and those guys were younger, when they first got to Chicago, so first, second, and third. So I'm going to give all of that to my agent if I get to the point where I feel I can write one, and then let her and my publisher decide, where we go next.
That will be awesome. We are in love with the characters. Okay.
Has escrito Los Crímenes de la Carretera a 4 manos con James Patterson, y ahora estamos esperando que se publique The Noise en agosto de este año. ¿Cómo es para ti trabajar con un colega?
So you've written the Coast to Coast Murders with James Patterson, and now we are also waiting for the release of The Noise in August this year. So how is it for you to work with a co-writer?
It's actually pretty easy. When I was working as a book doctor and ghostwriter for those 20 years, that's a lot of what I did, working with other people. And it's very similar to cooking a large meal, with somebody in the kitchen. You're multiple cooks in the kitchen. You can all kind of work on the same thing and trip over each other, or you figure out, well, you're going to do this, I'm going to do this, and you do this, and you do that, and you delegate. So when I work with a co-author, we try to figure out, everybody's strengths, figure out what they're good at and what they're not good at, and we divide up the workload. With Jim, it was particularly tricky because, I mentioned earlier that I don't use an outline. He always uses an outline. So when we first sat down, we had lunch down in Florida, and we were talking about doing something together. That was kind of a sticking point, because I don't like working with outlines, and I told him that. And he had never done a book without one. So we finished up that lunch and, kind of went our separate ways. I didn't think anything was going to come of it. But then we ended up talking again, and he said, "You know what? I think I'll try it. Let's try to write one without an outline." So we did that. He came up with the idea for the book, the main premise of it. And then we just went back and forth, chapter by chapter. And we had a lot of fun with it because we would paint each other into a corner. There's a lot of twist in that book, and that was because we were trying to trip each other up. He would write something, and make it seem, something impossible to get out of. And then he would hand the book off to me, and I would have to try and figure out how to solve the problem he just created. So then I would try to create an even more difficult scenario, and then I would give it back to him. And we wrote the whole book that way, and we had a ball. But when we finished that one, he said, okay, we did it your way. Now let's try it my way. And he wrote the outline for the noise and gave me that. And, that's the first book I've ever written with an outline. And I'm really proud of it. I think you're in for a treat when that one comes out. It's the scariest book he's ever been involved with, for sure.
JD, hace rato mencionaste que cuando niño, tenías 8 años, leíste Drácula. ¿Qué significó años después escribir Drácula, el origen, tener acceso a los archivos personales de la familia y poder ver dónde estuvo Bram Stoker en el momento, en su infancia? ¿Cómo fue este proceso para ti?
Okay. As someone who read Dracula at very young age, as you told us, how was for you to write the prequel many years later? And if you, of course, you have access to the Stoker family records, how was to be working with that? And how was your process writing this prequel? I don't know if I was clear.
that was a crazy experience.
Okay.
Very, very surreal. So when I first met with Dacre Stoker, that's Bram's great-grandnephew, and he asked me if I wanted to be part of this project, he told me 2 different things that really convinced me. The first one was that when Bram originally wrote Dracula, he planned it to be a true story, not fiction. He tried to sell it as a true story. And his publisher at the time, said, no, there's no way we're going to do that. And it's mainly because in England at the time, in the UK, Jack the Ripper was active, and people were scared to death. And they believed in the supernatural. I mean, a lot of people still do, but back then almost, everybody did. So they were very worried about what would happen if they put a book out there that said vampires are real and here's why. Bram at the time, he needed the money. He wasn't, he was a theater manager, but he wasn't, making a lot of money. So he needed to publish that book. So he agreed to change it into a work of fiction. And in doing so, they actually took out the first 102 pages of the book. So the story that we know, that starts with Jonathan Harker on the train, that's actually page 103 of the original novel. The first 102 pages were very autobiographical, and basically explained why vampires were real. Bram, to his dying day, he swore that the people in that book, Mina and Jonathan Harker, Van Helsing, he swore that all those people were real people and those stories were true. He did something else which I found fascinating. So in today's world, when I write a book, I write it in English. I work with one editor and one publisher here in the US. And when it's time to publish in all these other countries, they take that version of the book and they send that out to the translators. So everybody works off the same book. In Bram's day, it didn't work that way. So when he sold his book in Spain and Ireland and Germany and France, he actually mailed out the books to those different publishers in those different countries. So he did something that nobody realized he did until recently. He left a lot of those original parts in the story. So things that got edited out in that UK version were still present in these other books. Nobody discovered them up until Dacre Stoker a few years ago, because Dracula is so popular and it's in public domain. The translations now are all done off the public domain translation. So in order to find these things, you have to find a first edition of Dracula, which is very rare and very expensive, and then translate it back to English. And he found things like, Dracula had a wife. There were other people in the castle, completely different storylines, different characters. So when we wrote Dracul, we went back through all of Bram's notes, everything the Stoker family had, and we pieced together those first 100-some pages of the book. Once we finished that, and that basically became Dracul, the novel that we wrote, we needed to verify the information that we found. So I learned that only one copy of the original Dracula manuscript actually exists in the world. And it was found in a barn in Pennsylvania here in the United States. Nobody really knows how it got there. Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, bought it at auction, and he owns it. So I called Paul Allen's company, and they allowed Dacre and I to go out to Seattle and examine this, to actually look at it. So the first thing we did is open it to the beginning to see if those 100 pages were there, and they weren't. The very first page, it starts at page 103. It's crossed out. There's an X through it, and it says 1. The original title was The Undead. They changed, that's crossed out. Dracula's original name was Count Vampire. And there's a section in there where he crossed that out and he wrote in Dracula. What we did find is, in today's world, if you delete a sentence, it's gone because you're working on a computer. In Bram's time, they drew a line through it, or they crossed it out because they had a paper document. So we started going through the rest of the manuscript, looking at everything that had been deleted, everything that he crossed out, and we quickly realized those sections referred back to the original 100 pages. So by looking at the deleted scenes, we were able to put together and confirm that what we had done as a novel was correct. And that's how we basically finalized Dracul. If you read the author's note in the back of the book, we explain a lot of this. And to me, that's the most fascinating part of the entire novel, is that author's note.
¿Sueles leer las críticas que los lectores hacen de tus libros?
Okay, the question is, do you read the reviews that your reader post about your books?
I probably shouldn't, but I do. Because honestly, like when the big newspapers and magazines review a book, that's one person's opinion of that book. And they're not paid very well to do it. So I prefer to read, like I go to Goodreads all the time and look at the reviews that are on there, the good and the bad. Because the bad helped me improve the next book. If people have a problem with something, I want to know what that problem is, and I try to weed it out. So it's kind of like getting feedback from a couple 100,000 different people, which I like. And I'm not going to lie, the good reviews are fun to read. It recharges my batteries. If I'm in a bad mood, or I'm not sure if I can get through the next chapter that I've got to write, I can read a couple of those, and they kind of remind me of why I do this in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
Con respecto a lo que nosotros hacemos en el club, si él pudiera leer todas las hipótesis que nosotros hicimos en el club con este segundo libro, haría otro más.
Mercedes is saying that if you were able to see just the amount of theories that we have come up with this second book of the fourth monkey killer, it's just you would keep on writing the series, because we have many ideas. You should listen to us.
Maybe I will. You can help me do the next one.
That would be amazing.
Nos gustaría que le dejaras a todas las personas que no pudieron asistir del club de lectura que están en este momento leyendo tu serie, nos gustaría que le dejaras un mensaje a todos estos lectores.
So, as we mentioned earlier, we are here in representation of over 160 people back in the Actriz book club, and we are all reading your series. I'm very excited. We are enjoying it very much. So would you have any message for them? We are just about to start the third book, so if you could send them, tell them something, that would be, they would really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate everybody taking the time to actually read the books. It's, that's the ultimate compliment, to have a group like yours actually out there reading it and enjoying it and talking about it. That's the reason I do this kind of thing. It makes it fun and makes it worthwhile. There's absolutely nothing I can tell you about the book, because I don't want to give anything away. Keep making your theories, keep trying to come up with how it's going to end. I can guarantee you're not going to figure it out. I know that too. We're watching Mayor of Easttown on HBO right now, trying to figure out who the killer is. So but we play that same game in my house. It's fun.
Sí. Si estás trabajando en un nuevo proyecto actualmente.
So our last question is if you are working on something new, and if you can tell us anything about it.
I'm always working on something new, and there's not a whole lot I can tell you. I try to bounce back and forth between thrillers and horror, which drives my agent crazy, but I like writing both. So right now I'm working on a horror novel. Jim and I have a third book that we just wrapped on not too long ago, so that's going to be coming out soon. My latest one to release here in the States is called A Caller's Game. Oh, and that's backwards.
Yeah.
I know that's coming out in Spanish sometime soon, but I'm not sure the exact release date. So yeah, I'm good for about 2 or 3 books a year. I'll keep you guys busy.
Okay, so we want to thank you again for your time, for giving us this opportunity to talk with you. We are very excited, very happy to be with you face to face and talk about all the things that we are thinking all the time when we read your books. And okay, that's it. We just really appreciate your time and your attitude with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Say hello to everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.